r/AskReddit, what are some cryptid/ghost/unexplained stories you'd be willing to share? One afternoon I was at work. I walked past a room with a window in the door and automatically glanced in the window. There was a woman standing in the room. Except there are only 3 people in the building and the other 2 were in the office behind me. I took a couple steps, realized what I had just seen, and backed up quickly, but by the time I got back to the window the room was empty. There was only one door and when I opened it the room was empty. At the same building, a co-worker was telling me that she was in the office right around the corner from that same room. She couldn't see the door but she could see the shadow of the door on the floor as it slowly opened and closed. She was the only one in the building at the time and she refused to check. I arrived about an hour later and she asked me to check the door and it was still locked. I worked there about 3 years and every single one of us had stories. We heard voices in empty rooms. Once we were sitting in the office and we heard somebody breathing in an empty corner. It was common to be in one of the rooms and think somebody had just walked into the room, only to look up and find that the room was empty except for you. I had one manager who scoffed at all of our stories. She did not believe us when we told her there was something fairly benign but creepy in the building. We were sitting in the office, she scoffed and loudly said, "If there's anything in here, prove it." We all held our breath, kind of nervous, a bit scared but also curious. And just about the time my manager was getting that look on her face that said, "Ha, told you so," something was thrown out in the hallway. It took us several minutes to work up the courage before going to check and finding that a book that normally sat on a bookshelf near the front door had somehow gone from that bookshelf around the corner and halfway down the hallway. The manager never talked about it and quit shortly after that. I've since quit also, but last I heard they were still hearing voices and seeing shadows in the building. I was looking for something like this. This is more unexplained/ghostly than cryptid, unless of course others have seen these things. Also obligatory written on mobile, sorry for weird format message. Anyways, weird story time. Recently I got a weird rush of nostalgia after finding an old blanket of mine when I was like 2 or 3, and I remembered an odd thing that happened to me when me and my parents were still living in a small town in southwest Missouri back in the early 2000s. The house we were living in was every definition of a shithole, and we really only stayed there cause my mom at the time was still in school but was close to graduating and becoming a nurse. She is one now BTW. I have generally pleasant memories of the place, but that's mainly because we lived like 2 streets away from my dad's parents and we'd visit them a lot. The house itself felt kinda weird, which was probably because of how shitty it was. It was always dark in the house, even with the lights on, and the AC was awful. Anyway, when I was really little, can't remember specifically, I was still playing with my toys in my bedroom, using the small windowsill as a makeshift table to play with those tiny metal Thomas and Friends trains with the magnet couples. I was having a grand time when I heard a shuffling noise near my bedroom door, which was open. I thought it was my parents, so I turned around expecting to see Dad tell me, "Hey bud, it's bedtime." Instead I saw nothing. Nothing but my open bedroom door. But I still heard the shuffling. It sounded almost like wool slippers rubbing against carpet. At first I wasn't weirded out, I was a very friendly toddler after all, until I realized that the shuffling was behind my closed door. Before I could react, however, the noises stopped, and after a few seconds of silence I turned back around to play with my toys. Then in the reflection of my window I saw my door being pushed shut by a fuzzy Oscar the Grouch-esque hand, but highlighter pink instead of green. I turned around to see what closed my door, and to my toddler-brained horror I saw not 1, not 2, but 3 tall, lanky, and, oddly, fuzzy pink creatures standing in the corner of my room where the door was. The best way I can describe these creatures is like Teletubbies if they did hardcore drugs. Like meth and crack at the same time. Each of them were built like freak show contortionists with a weird pink-colored coat of muddled fur, over an anorexic frame. Their faces looked like a melted Thomas the Tank Engine face with empty misshapen holes for eyes. On their head they also had weird antlers, kinda like a deer's antlers, but way weirder, and as I mentioned earlier, their hands reminded me of Oscar the Grouch's hands. All three of them were somehow able to perfectly conceal themselves behind my door, which is probably what freaked me out the most. The fact that I turned around just a few seconds before and saw nothing, not even a shape behind that door, but once I stopped looking they were just suddenly there is some horror movie shit. I looked at them for a few minutes, most likely in shock and disbelief, until I slowly started to realize that these things definitely weren't safe to be around. Each of them was standing differently, had a different feature about them. The one in the middle was standing perfectly upright, save for a slight slouch, and had really big antlers and the most scuffed face of the three. The one on its left was leaning forward, towards me, and had its hand on the door, holding it shut, and had a lot of dirt and burnt spots on its weird coat. The one on the far right was in my opinion the creepiest. It was standing up, but whereas the others were standing still, as soon as I looked at this one, it crouched down, way too quickly I might add, and slowly began to crawl towards me. This one had a mostly intact face, but its empty eyes were almost fused shut because of the, what I assume is, melted latex. As soon as it moved towards me I freaked the hell out and hid under my bed covers, literally crying as I hoped what I saw was fake and not literal demon Wendigo Teletubbies coming to snatch me up at 8 o'clock in the evening. The next day I woke up perfectly normal like nothing ever happened, and I thought it was a dream. Then I looked around and saw my bedroom door shut and the box of miscellaneous items that usually sat on top of my dresser spilled all over my bedroom floor. I did neither of those things, and at the time, I had no siblings, and the previous night, with the weird Teletubby demons, it was just me and my dad in the house while my mom was working. I haphazardly picked up the mess and set the box down in front of my dresser, then left the room to eat breakfast. Life returned to normal. My unmedicated ADHD child brain eventually forgot about it. We left the house a month later, and that was that. Except when I entered the 3rd grade. Then I'd occasionally have a nightmare where one of those things would appear. I've mentioned them to my parents about 4 times, and each time they got spooked, even my dad, who's skeptical about that stuff and very rarely gets freaked out by spooky ghost shit, and my mom always changes the subject. Now I'm at a dilemma because I don't know what they are. If they're fake and were just a figment of my imagination, then why the hell am I still seeing them in my dreams even a decade and a half later? If they're real, then what the fuck are they? Also, why have my parents, even my paranormally skeptical dad, been very uneasy every time I mention them? I have little to no answers and I honestly just hope I never see them in person again. Reply. It was a rainy winter morning. My father and I were pulling out of the driveway headed to school. We both saw a glimpse of a girl in a white dress, barefoot, blonde, maybe 5 years old, run around the corner of our home and out of sight. We both looked at each other and acknowledged that we witnessed the same thing. He got out of the car and ran around the house to look for her. When he came back he said he couldn't find anyone but called my mom to let her know that a little kid might be running around the yard. We thought it was weird but not much was said of it. And there weren't any missing kids in the area. A few months later we were remodeling our basement and found a photo album hidden behind the drywall. It was full of photos of a little girl with blonde hair in a white dress. The photo album was from 1922. The family that originally lived in the house died of TB. Ugh. I made a throwaway to post this because people know my main and it's kind of embarrassing, and I've only told my partner because I'm definitely the type who rolls my eyes at ghost stories and holds firm on the stance that I don't believe in ghosts. And yet, I have 2 brothers and we all lived in a small house when I was about 8 to 11 years old. All of us kids hated the downstairs. It was always chilly, which is normal for a basement, but it felt like a creepy chilly. Sounds lame, I know, but my little brother, probably 6 when we first had that house, had a room downstairs and hated it. Would go so far as to not sleep in his room because he was so frightened. He wouldn't even enter the basement bathroom. He always had awful nightmares in that house, and so did I. All of us kids still refer to it as the haunted house. It sounds stupid to type, but it just truly had a bad feeling to it. Anyways, the incident, I was about 11 and downstairs alone. There was like a 45-minute gap between getting off school and when my mom got home, and my brothers weren't there, must have been with my dad, can't quite remember. So I was on the computer, which was in the basement. And to my left is the staircase heading up, and my cat was sitting on the landing between the first set of stairs and the second. It's also only about 4 p.m, so it was light out and I had no music playing, so there was nothing to confuse me. This next part will probably sound minor and not freaky, but I get chills thinking of it. Suddenly, I hear hi 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 starting as a whisper and getting progressively louder and circling the room, as though someone was running around. I might have chalked it up to me hearing something, I guess, except when the hi got to the staircase, directly to my left, my cat arched her back and hissed loudly. I ducking bolted upstairs, my cat following me, and never went down solo again until we moved into our next house. I work graveyard shift security, and the shadows don't act right. The human shadows where they shouldn't be are one thing, but I can dismiss them, even when I'm inside an unlit room illuminated by light that just reflects in and casts none. What gets me is when I'm inside and pacing around between patrols, sometimes I see something pacing with me from the corner of my eye. It's on 4 legs but its gait is messed up, like it has human hips and shoulders but its 4 legs are as long as its hind legs. It's got a build like you took a dog and stretched its limbs out, then flattened and elongated its abdomen. Its head is oversized like the head of a huge boar on the body of a tall but thin dog. Like the silhouettes, it's just a shadow and I only see it out of the corner of my eye and when I've just been light blinded. You know how when you look at a bright light then away it leaves an after image of the light source's shape? Instead of that I'll see the shadow thing. It's not always following me when I see it, but mostly it's inside and I leave when I see it. The idea I have of what it looks like comes from many brief glimpses over a couple years. The worst part is the way it moves. With the body style I described, but like the music video for Schism at 3:17 in. Anyway, brains are weird, huh? Ghosts have always gravitated towards me. I used to live in an apartment that was redone because of a fire and someone died because of it. I had no clue that the apartment I lived in had the death. I happened to choose the room where the woman passed. The whole time I lived there I'd get shaken awake at 7:30 every weekday morning. I'd look and see no one. Go back to sleep and immediately get shaken again. Look. And again see no one. Try to sleep again. Get shaken even harder. I'd get up and go to the couch. At 8 a.m. I'd get shaken again. Go back to my bed to go back to sleep. I worked nights as a dishwasher, so 7:30 and 8 was too early for me. When my girlfriend moved in with me, that's when I realized it was a woman who died in my room when the fire happened. Because after my girlfriend moved in I'd still get shaken awake every weekday morning at 7:30 and 8 o'clock, but my girlfriend wouldn't. Women get changed together all the time, so having my girlfriend in the room was fine to this ghost, but not me. And 30 minutes is just enough time for a woman to get ready for work after her shower. We figured she liked us because we'd start to hear a disembodied laugh every now and then. Not a bad laugh, a genuine "that's funny" laugh. It spooked everyone who heard it at first, but we got used to it after a while. Then one day my girlfriend invited my ex-girlfriend over. No biggie, they were friends. My ex and I agreed after a troubled relationship that we're better friends. That female ghost hated my ex. The room would get cold whenever my ex came by and she'd hear angered growls. Just my ex. One night when they were getting ready to head out to the bar, my ex took a shower at the apartment because it was better than hers. She comes out of the bathroom white as a ghost and scared. "Didn't you hear me yell?" she asked us. I thought you guys were fucking with the light in the bathroom. It kept going on and off. I could hear the switch. Then the water goes ice cold and I could see the outline of a hand go past the shower head. No, not a word came from the bathroom. I guess the ghost doesn't like you, said my girlfriend said. You did not say anything about a ghost here, my ex said sternly. How can you live like this? Oh, she loves us. We make her laugh, I said. Really? All I hear are growls when I'm here. Explains why it gets cold when you come by, my girlfriend said. I thought you had no heat. Heat bills paid. It only happens when you're here, I said. Fine. I won't come by anymore. She clearly hate me, my ex said. She never went back to the apartment. After that it went back to normal. Every weekday I'd get shaken awake at 7:30 and 8 o'clock. The disembodied laugh came back. Then a year later we moved out. I'm fairly certain the ghost came with us because my roommate who lived with us said it was too quiet and the apartment door stopped opening and closing on its own at 8 o'clock on weekdays. I had no clue about the door to the hall until he said that. Well, thanks.